The door that never opens. Subscribe if you can handle the truth, like if you're not afraid of the dark, and comment if you think you already know where this is going. Because once this story starts, there's no walking back. The sirens cut through the desert silence like knives. Red and blue lights bounced off endless stretches of scrubland as a convoy of armored vehicles tore down a sealed road that wasn't marked on any public map. At the center of the convoy was a steel transport van, windowless, reinforced, and shaking slightly from the weight of the man inside. His name wasn't being spoken aloud anymore. In official reports, he was just Inmate X 417. Minutes earlier, a body had been found hanging from a guard tower inside one of Australia's most secure prisons. No struggle, no warning. Just a man who had worked there for 18 years, dead in a place where nothing was supposed to go wrong. And now, for the first time in the facility's history, a prisoner was being moved in the dead of night. Supermax, Australia, wasn't a single prison. It was a system inside a system, a place designed for people the government quietly admitted it could never release. Built far from cities, buried behind layers of secrecy, it was where riots ended, gangs disappeared, and names stopped being names. Once someone crossed the threshold, they didn't come back out. Not to court, not to the media, not to society. Detective Sergeant Mark Holloway stood at the edge of the crime scene, boots crunching against gravel, staring up at the tower where the guard had died. Holloway had spent 2 decades chasing murderers, but this place made his skin crawl. There were too many cameras, too many locked doors, and too many rules about what he was allowed to ask. "Suicide?" he asked, already knowing the answer would be unsatisfying. The prison governor didn't look at him. That's the preliminary finding. Holloway raised an eyebrow. Preliminary doesn't explain why a security card was used to access cell block C 15 minutes before he died. That finally got a reaction. A pause. A tightening of the jaw. Cell block C was reserved for prisoners under permanent containment orders. Men deemed too dangerous to ever walk free again. Terrorists, cartel enforcers, contract killers. And one name sat at the top of that list, highlighted and read across every internal briefing. Ethan Cross. Cross wasn't famous in the way serial killers usually were. No documentaries. No podcasts. No courtroom theatrics. That was deliberate. His crimes stretched across borders, money laundering, witness intimidation, orchestrated murders that never directly tied back to him. People who testified against his network had a habit of vanishing, overdosing, or recanting overnight. 5 years earlier, when police finally arrested him in Perth, Cross smiled as he was led away. He didn't ask for a lawyer. He didn't resist. And during sentencing, when the judge declared he would never be eligible for parole, Cross leaned forward and whispered something that never made it into the transcript. "You're going to need a bigger cage." Inside Supermax, Cross became a ghost. No visitors. No phone calls. No recorded incidents. Guard said he was polite, quiet, cooperative. Too cooperative. Until tonight. Holloway was granted limited access to surveillance footage. What he saw raised more questions than answers. The dead guard entered cell block C alone. Cameras inside the corridor flickered for exactly 90 seconds, long enough to obscure whatever happened next. When the feed returned, the guard was gone. 20 minutes later, he was found dead, and Cross... Holloway asked. The governor folded her arms. Still in his cell. They stood in front of it together. A solid steel door, reinforced seams, observation slit closed. According to protocol, Cross should have been restrained and sedated during any nighttime disturbance. Instead, he was sitting on his bed, hands folded, staring directly at the door as if he knew they were coming. When the slit opened, Cross smiled. "Busy night," he said calmly. Holloway felt a chill run through him. A man is dead. Cross tilted his head. People die here all the time. They just usually don't get headlines. The search of Cross's cell turned up nothing illegal. No weapons. No notes. No contraband. But something was wrong. Holloway noticed the bed frame, bolted to the floor, immovable, had been shifted a few centimeters to the left. "That's not possible," a guard muttered. They checked maintenance logs. No authorized entry. No recorded adjustments. Later that night, Holloway received a call that made his stomach drop. The transport convoy had reached its destination. The prisoner was being transferred to Containment Zero, a level so restricted that even most Supermax staff didn't know existed. Why move him now? Holloway demanded over the phone. Because, the voice replied, we found something in the guard's locker. Inside was a burner phone. No fingerprints. No call history. Just one unsent draft message. Typed but never delivered. He knows about the door. Holloway stared at the words long after the call ended. Supermax didn't have doors prisoners knew about. Every wall, every corridor, every exit was mapped, monitored, and controlled. Unless someone had built something that wasn't supposed to be there. As dawn broke over the desert, engineers were ordered to inspect the oldest section of the prison, an underground service area sealed off years earlier after fire. Most staff believed it was just storage, until a thermal scan revealed a hollow space behind the concrete, a space big enough to hide a passage. And when they finally breached the wall, shining their lights into the darkness beyond, they realized the truth was far worse than anyone imagined, because the passage wasn't leading out. It was leading deeper in. Containment Zero. The air behind the broken wall was colder, heavier, like it hadn't been disturbed in years. Holloway stepped into the hidden passage with a torch in one hand and a tightening sense of dread in his chest. The concrete corridor sloped downward, not toward freedom, but toward the heart of the prison. Whoever built it hadn't been planning an escape. They'd been planning control. The passage ended at a sealed steel door marked with faded symbol Holloway didn't recognize. No barcode, no keypad, just a mechanical lock. So old it felt out of place in a facility obsessed with modern surveillance. Engineers confirmed the worst part within minutes. The door wasn't on any blueprint. This shouldn't exist, one of them whispered. Yet it did, and someone had used it recently. Inside, the room was small and windowless, containing nothing but a chair bolted to the floor, a drain, and restraints embedded into the walls. No cameras, no microphones, no official record. It wasn't a cell. It was a place to break people quietly. Holloway realized then why the guard had died. He hadn't stumbled onto something by accident. He had been brought here. Containment Zero was activated less than an hour later. Ethan Cross was transferred without ceremony, escorted by guards who had been handpicked for loyalty rather than experience. No names were spoken over comms. Every movement was logged manually, not digitally. Someone high up was afraid of leaving a trail. Cross walked calmly, shackles clinking with each step. He looked around as though he were being given a private tour rather than disappearing into the most secret level of incarceration in the country. You finally found it, he said softly, not looking at anyone in particular. Holloway stepped forward. Found what? Cross smiled. The place where rules stop applying. Containment Zero wasn't just isolation. It was erasure. No scheduled checks. No recorded interviews. Prisoners sent there were legally alive but operationally invisible. The official justification was national security. The unspoken truth was simpler. Some men knew too much. Within 24 hours of Cross's transfer, the investigation began to collapse. The guard's family was informed the death was ruled a suicide. The burner phone vanished from evidence storage. The camera malfunction logs were overwritten by a routine system update that no one could trace back to a user. Holloway filed objections, each one denied before it reached a supervisor. And then the warning started. An unmarked envelope appeared on his desk containing photocopies of sealed court documents, cases Holloway had worked on years ago, witnesses who had disappeared, deals that had been quietly rewritten. At the bottom of the stack was a handwritten note. You already know how this ends. Holloway took the files home and stayed up all night reading. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Every major organized crime prosecution that had failed over the last decade shared one invisible link. Ethan Cross. Not as a defendant, not even as a suspect. As a shadow. Someone whose name had been redacted so thoroughly it barely existed. Cross hadn't just been a criminal. He had been a broker, trading information between gangs, corporations, and corrupt officials. When he was finally arrested, the system hadn't known what to do with him. A public trial would have exposed too much. An execution would have made him a martyr. So they built Supermax around him, then buried him deeper when that was enough. Holloway requested an interview. The request was denied. 2 days later, a junior officer named Callum Reed was found unconscious in a maintenance corridor near Containment Zero. No injuries. No signs of a struggle. Just a single phrase carved lightly into the concrete beside him. Still breathing. Reed survived, but when questioned, he couldn't remember how he got there. He insisted he'd been responding to a routine alarm. Records showed no alarm had been triggered. Fear crept through the facility like a virus. Guards started calling in sick. Night shifts were understaffed. Every unexplained noise echoed longer than it should have. Cross, locked away in the deepest level, was somehow becoming more present than ever. Holloway finally got his interview, not through approval, but through leverage. He threatened to take his concerns to the media, knowing full well the backlash would end his career. The response came quickly. 1 hour. No recording. No notes. Containment Zero smelled of disinfectant and rust. Cross sat in the restraint chair, unshackled, relaxed. His eyes tracked Holloway's movements with unsettling precision. "You killed the guard," Holloway said. Cross didn't deny it. "I didn't touch him." "Then how?" "I reminded him who he worked for." Holloway clenched his fists. "You're locked in a box you can't leave." Cross leaned forward. "Boxes only work if everyone agrees where the walls are." He spoke calmly, explaining how Supermax wasn't designed to keep prisoners in, but to keep secrets contained. How certain inmates were used as leverage, threats held in reserve, pressure points against people in power. Cross had been one of them, until he wasn't useful anymore. "So you killed a man to get moved?" Holloway asked. "No," Cross replied. "I killed a man because he was going to kill me." Holloway froze. "The door you found," Cross continued, "wasn't built for interrogation. It was built for disposal. Quiet ones. People who became inconvenient." Holloway thought the erase files, the missing evidence, the careers that ended without explanation. "Why tell me?" he asked. Cross smiled again, but this time there was no warmth in it. "Because you're already compromised. And because you're running out of time." A siren blared above them, sharp and wrong. Emergency lockdown. Holloway turned toward the door as it slammed shut. Over the intercom, a distorted voice crackled to life. "All staff evacuate level 7 immediately." Cross closed his eyes, almost relieved. "They've decided," he said softly. "Neither of us is supposed to leave here." As the lights flickered and the sound of heavy machinery roared somewhere deep within the walls, Holloway realized the truth too late. Containment Zero wasn't just a place to hide prisoners. It was a place to make them disappear. The men who never leave. The floor vibrated beneath Holloway's feet as the lockdown sealed itself layer by layer. Steel shutters slammed down corridors. Ventilation systems reversed, forcing cold air into spaces not meant to hold it. Somewhere above them, the rest of the prison was being emptied, staff ordered out under the pretense of a security drill that would never be logged. Holloway pounded on the door. No response. The intercom hissed once, then went dead. Across from him, Ethan Cross remained seated, unnervingly calm. "This is the part where they erased the mistake," he said. "You..." Holloway turned back. "You knew this would happen." "I hoped," Cross replied. "There's a difference." The lights flickered again. This time, they didn't come back at full strength. Emergency lighting bathed the room in a dull amber glow, stretching shadows across the walls like prison bars that never quite touched the floor. "You said the guard was going to kill you," Holloway said. "Who gave the order?" Cross studied him. "If I say a name, it won't matter. You'll never reach them." "That's not an answer. It's the only honest one." A low mechanical hum began to rise, steady and deliberate. Holloway recognized it from old case files and classified briefings he was never supposed to read. Environmental purge systems, designed to sterilize spaces permanently. Containment Zero was being wiped. Holloway backed away from the chair, scanning the room. No vents large enough to crawl through. No secondary exits. Just a drain in the floor, already vibrating faintly as pressure built beneath it. You set this in motion, Holloway said. Why bring me down here at all? Cross met his gaze. Because someone needs to walk out with the truth. Holloway laughed bitterly. You just said neither of us is supposed to leave. That's what they think. For the first time, Cross stood. Holloway noticed then what the restraints really were, not just metal, but old-fashioned magnetic locks, tied to a manual override system no one used anymore. Cross reached behind a chair and pulled free a slim object wrapped in cloth. A key. You planned this, Holloway said. I planned for every ending, Cross replied, including this one. Before Holloway could react, Cross pressed a key into his hand. There's a service lift at the end of the passage you found. It was decommissioned on paper, but it still works. Barely. It will take one person to level 2. And you? Holloway asked. Cross smiled faintly. I was never leaving. The hum grew louder. Warning lights ignited along the ceiling. Holloway hesitated, every instinct screaming that this was a trap. Why help me? He asked. Because I don't get redemption, Cross said quietly. But you might get exposure. Holloway turned and ran. The passage shook as he sprinted through it, boots slipping on concrete dust shaken loose by the purge system. Behind him, Mel screamed as pressure seals engaged. The service lift was exactly where Cross said it would be, rusted, ancient, and trembling like it might collapse at any second. He slammed the key into the override and punched the button. The doors closed just as a deafening roar filled the tunnel behind him. The lift climbed slowly, agonizingly, each meter feeling like a gamble. When it finally shuddered to a stop, Holloway forced the doors open with his hands and collapsed onto the cold floor of level 2. Alarms were still blaring, but the tone was different now. Contained. Controlled. Later, they told him Containment Zero had suffered a catastrophic systems failure. They told him Ethan Cross was dead, along with classified materials deemed too dangerous to preserve. They told him the guard's death was unrelated, an unfortunate coincidence. They told him to forget. Holloway didn't. He leaked everything he could, documents, diagrams, testimony. Carefully, anonymously, over months. Enough to raise questions. Not enough to name names. Parliamentary inquiries were announced, then quietly dissolved. A handful of officials resigned for personal reasons. The prison system promised reform. Supermax Australia remained operational. Officially, Containment Zero never existed. Years later, Holloway stood outside the same desert complex, now expanded, modernized, cleaner. A new generation of inmates passed through its gates, faces blank, future sealed. A journalist asked him one final question as cameras rolled. Do you believe all the dangerous prisoners are truly locked away? Holloway thought of the hidden room, the erased man, the door that led deeper in, not out. No, he said. I think some prisons aren't built to hold criminals. And what are they built for? She pressed. He hesitated. Secrets, he said, and the people who know them. That night, Holloway returned home to find a package waiting at his door. No return address. Inside was a single photograph, grainy, black and white. It showed Containment Zero's restraint chair. Empty. On the back, written in familiar handwriting, were 4 words. Still breathing. Still inside. If this story kept you watching until the end, just remember, some doors don't open because they're locked, and some because someone doesn't want you to know what's behind them. Subscribe and stay close. You won't want to miss the next one.